here's a video on how to lower the action on your Ernie Ball EVH and Axis CX guitar. It'll also work on an Axis guitar. First thing best to do is to take a picture of your bridge so you can see where your saddles are. So it's where it's intonated, you can see basically where it's at now. Okay. And the second thing you're going to do is take off your back panel with the 6 screws and loosen your claw and back it out, you know, probably a good amount, so there is not a lot of tension on that. And then you're going to go ahead and loosen your locking nut and loosen the strings. And once they're all loose, then you can go ahead and take over here, you can go ahead and take these out, take all your strings out of your bridge. And then on the back, you'll take your springs out of the back of the block. Then you're going to have your fingers and your spacer. You're going to take your intonation screws off your saddles. You're going to take them out and you're going to put them in the order that they started. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. I always like to check, because if people have messed with the guitar in the past, a lot of times I've seen them in the wrong spaces. Sometimes people will even put shims underneath those saddles. You don't really need shims. All you really need to do is make sure it's on the low E, it's 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, ending at the high E. Okay? So you take those out, set them aside, set your screws with the saddle, and then there's going to be 3 screws that are holding your block on. You're going to take those 3 screws out, your block's going to come out, you're going to take your fingers and the spacer off. You're going to reattach your block, attach the 3 screws, and then you can start putting your saddles from your picture. Look at your picture, and then you can see where these screws were and where approximately the saddle was. So you can get that back to close enough, and then you'll have to re-intonate. Then the next thing you'll do is you'll take your bridge and you'll set it on the body flat, like you can see in this picture. This has already been done. You'll set it flat. You're going to lower these 2 Allen screws so that the knife edges are in the slot. Make sure that they're in the slot exactly. And then you just want to make sure with no tension the bridge is sitting flat on the body. From that point, you're good with the bridge. You're done. If it's an EVH, chances are there is a shim in that neck. Okay, I've seen the Ernie Ball ones in there, and a lot of times they're kind of like glued in, or they've been there for a while if they're original. I've seen different colors. They're brown, yellow, and pink, so it just depends on how much they shimmed the neck at the factory. But typically, if your neck's never been off, there should be a shim in there. I've seen people put business cards, I've seen people put everything. But you won't need a shim. Typically, you will not need a shim doing it this way. So you're going to need to take your neck off. So once you take your neck off, the 5 bolts, see if there's a shim. As long as there's no shim, then just remount the neck. And then check your nut. I've seen people put shims underneath the nut, so if you're not the original owner on the guitar, you know, there could be a shim underneath the nut. I've seen shims under there as well. So I usually take all the shims out if there's any under the nut. I take all the shims out if there's any under the neck, and then make sure that obviously when you take off your saddles, you'll know if there's, I've seen a lot of people put shims underneath the saddles to try and get the correct radius, and you really don't need that as well. So once you lay your bridge back on the body flat and everything looks good, both of them are about the same. They're going to be the same depth. Just making sure those knife edges in both are perfect. Then you can go ahead and put the bridge back in, and leave your claw loose, and reattach your springs. You know, you can do a V with 2 springs. If you want to have 3 springs, you can have 3 springs in there. You don't really need more than that on these guitars with 9 to 42s. Then string your guitar. If you're putting on new strings, then you know how to do that. If not, you can just reattach your strings inside the saddles. Once you do that, you can start tightening your strings and retuning your strings. Then you can go to the back. Once you tune it, it's probably going to be lifting off up here, so you need to tighten your claw screws so that it's tight enough that it keeps the back end onto the body. Usually they're pretty close to almost in, but you know, within about a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch. Once that's all done, then you retune it again, and then you can check your intonation. If you have to move any of your saddles up or back, then you just loose the string, re-intonate, and then you should be done. Then you can lock your top locking nut. The action will be pretty low. Sometimes it may buzz a little acoustically, but it won't buzz when you're playing. Now this is also with the neck pretty straight, so the neck is dead straight. So the truss rod adjustments here, which it's to the front of the pickup. You can tighten that, make sure it's not over straight or back bowed. Just if you have that straight, or even if you want to have a little relief, after you set it up, if you decide that maybe the action's a hair too low, you can always adjust the truss rod and loosen it, maybe a 1/4 turn, 1/8 to a 1/4 turn, and that'll give a little relief in the neck and will give you a little bit higher action that way. If you want to have really low action, you can have your neck dead straight and it'll sit fine. On Axis EX guitars, typically, I have not ever seen, in the 25 or 35 that I've owned, whenever I've went ahead and lowered the action on it, I have never seen a shim in the neck on an Axis. That doesn't mean that they won't be. It just means that if someone shimmed it, because typically any of these guitars that come factory, the strings are sit high off the frets because they have the fingers and the spacer, which are really not necessary, because the tension of the strings hold these screws up, and the spacer is just another piece that's in between the block and the bridge. So you really don't need that stuff. And this is all for getting lower action so that you can play the guitar and not have the strings a mile off the fretboard. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. If you have any comments, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll answer that when I see them. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.